Hey everyone, a nerd named Mark here, and it's time to go over episode 23 of Kamen Rider Geats. This is one of those situations where we got an info dump of big reveals for stuff and realizing certain things were just honestly not pertinent to the story, and we're just there to be there as kind of like not a bait and switch, but kind of like just have some substance in there. We got a big reveal of basically everything like this is why I haven't been theorizing as much in the last couple episodes since everything changed, because I'm like, who knows? There's been breadcrumbs and little sprinkles here and there that were, obviously hinting at the major reveal. And by the way, if you haven't seen the episode, obviously I'm going to spoil it. The major reveal is this is basically a show from like time travel. Basically, the DGP, the supporters, and that, they're from the far future, which Ace reveals later on in the episode. Um, this show basically is just for entertainment and audience in the future, kind of like how, and Gene brings it up, how we use, the Sengoku era or Greek mythology for entertainment. That's what the DGP is for people in the future. They basically are picking different time periods to have the DGP take place. So obviously, this means the Jamato aren't trying to destroy the world and they're not saving it. This was just the veil to convince everyone to do it. It also means that when we got flashbacks of Ace with his mother in like Greek times and this and that, and maybe that coin somehow he held on to it and this and that. So that's what maybe the show took place in that time period. Does that mean all the humans like K1, Neon, and this and that are taking place in the DGP, are they transported from into those different time periods? Is it still that? Like, I need to know those questions, but at least we know what the DGP is and everything else. So I'm glad that happened for a reveal. The episode itself starts off exactly where 22 left off, and man, Commoner Gene is OP. Like, it's not even a question. I mean, the fact that basically he can manipulate gravity and he also has a gun. So I'm like, oh, that's really cool because he just bodies freaking Buffa and Nage Sparrow. Buffa gets the brunt of it because when he's shooting at him, literally the claw and the zombie, the claws start breaking and this and that, which was a really cool scene to see. Um, I will say that this episode, when there was action sequences, the most thumbnail bait I've seen in a while. Because while I was watching the episode, I was thinking of the thumbnails, and I'm like, that'd be a good thumbnail. That'd be a good thumbnail. That's a good one. That's a good one. And I'm like, son of a like this was too. There was so much like thumbnail bait in this episode, and it was tough to pick out a thumbnail. One of the cool things though in this episode is we got to see this dynamic of like Ace questioning Niram and the GM about what's going on, what is all this other stuff like, and it was really intriguing because he's asking about the goddess creation, and even Niram says like, if I give you all this information, it's a waste of time because you're just gonna forget about everything anyways, and then you're never gonna have access to your wish again. And I was like, ooh, okay. Even Azuma's talking to Baroba and asking her questions about it. She obviously tells him everything that's going on off screen. So when we get back to that, the conversation's over, and she's even like, "Well, after you know all that, are you still gonna fight? What are you gonna do?" And he's like, "I don't care." He's like, I want my wish granted. I want to destroy Kamen Riders." And I'm like, that's the Azuma we know and love so much, just wanting to destroy everybody. I will say there were two great scenes where my least favorite character of the show, Shiram, or Sharam, the GM, gets slapped two times. And I was like, yes, please. I was like, the first time was when he was about the real stuff about the goddess of creation, I believe. And then the second time was when he was about to start speaking again when Ace was asking questions and wanted some answers. So I was like, you know what? He got slapped two times. This this makes me feel better. This that was worth it. Even slapped the lens out of the right side of his glasses, and I was like, you know what, you deserve it. Thank you for getting hit. Um, in so the whole idea of this whole entire thing is Baroba has the GM driver. She wants to get her wish fulfilled by the goddess of creation. She tries. It doesn't work because we find out that you need both drivers, as Niram confronts her. Obviously, this is all out of order. This happened earlier, but the reason why is because now the DGP and the disaster polls have been halted completely because you can't run the game without the GM having his driver. Now they're tasked with retrieving that from the Jamato Garden, and even Ace asks once again, how do they know where the home base is? What other Jamato? Like, and this whole entire time, like, we also get what my one theory that I was right about, at least, was Archimetal goes on to say that the areas that Kamen Rider failed to protect become gardens for the Jamato. So that area where they were was that one city when the Kick the Can monster actually won. So that is where that was. So I was like, yay, at least one thing I thought was right. That makes me feel slightly better. Not a lot better, but slightly better. Because this was, like I said, a lot of info, like, just dumped on us in this, but not a lot at the same time. Because even Ace now brings up, like, just a list of questions, like rapid fire. He's like, okay, why are they saving the world from Jamato in a reality show? Why are the people who are eliminated have their heart's desires erased? Who are the admins and the audience of the show? And I'm just like, yes, asking all these questions. These are the questions we want. And another question that I had still was about Neon's supporter, because we get a scene where Kekura and Keiwa are sitting down and talking. Kekura's just like, man, you're really, you're really becoming the definition of a Kamen Rider. And Keiwa's all like, yeah, cool. Then he gives him the boost buckle. And I'm like, oh great, you give Keiwa his arch enemy of the show, which is the boost buckle. I mean, it's probably gonna hit him in the face. I don't know. But we do see Neon's, because she goes to her supporter room finally, and it's just covered in nice flowers, nice little letter, and saying that even if everyone turns on her, this and that, her supporter is always going to support her and believes in her and this and that. And we find out her supporter's name is Kyun, but the supporter wasn't there, and I'm like, is that the guy from before that confronted her? And then she's given the fever buckle, so I'm like, that's cool. Um, there the amount of montage fight scenes, like I said, thumbnail bait, hardcore thumbnail bait. I'm all for it. Great scenes. Since supporters gave everyone else buckles, Ace is like, hey, you got a gift for me? And he's like, and Gene's just like, I'm your gift, you get to fight with me. And obviously, as a fanboy, he's just like, this is great, I get to fight with you, we get to do side by side henshins. Gene even does a little finger snap. And I actually have a theory now, because they're from the far future. I wonder if Gene is like somehow like a descendant of Ace. That's what I'm trying to figure out now. If they're from the far future, how are they somehow more tied to these Ace, Neon, Keiwa, etc.? Are they tied to them more than just I want to support them? Are there like family and blood related ties to them? Something. That's my main question now that I have going forward, other than if they're going to go to other eras to make the DGP take place, because that would be kind of cool. But like, so Gene, like I said, OP, like manipulating gravity. He's just wiping the floor with Jamatos, and he even has a support mode for his gun, and he shoots out like this little shield thing that Ace jumps on, and just like Silver Surfer, he's just flying around on it, shooting everybody. And I'm like, that's a thumbnail. That's a thumbnail. Everything is a thumbnail. And I'm like, no, Mark, compose yourself. Let's not go for the obvious thumbnails. But I do think everything about their fight montage was so good. And then Azuma shows up, and even, you know, Gene points out, he's like, oh, it's your rival. And he just walks away to go watch from the side like a little fanboy. And I'm like, we're getting Ace. We're getting Ace and Azuma again. And I'm like, please let them fight forever. Like, but at some point, I want a final showdown, because this didn't feel like, from a tone standpoint, this was going to be their final fight. It just didn't seem drastic enough, and the music wasn't good enough for it to be their final fight. Even Keiwa came through with the ninja boost form, bodying Jamatos, pulling out some good moves and this and that. And I was like, man, I like that he got that little pep. You're the definition of a Kamen Rider. And Kei was like, yeah. Now he's out there just like slapping Jamato riders. And even after that, him and Neon, because Neon did a double guitar, little like freaking welcome home from Coheed and Cambria solo, and took them out with fire and thunder. And even they have a talk. He's like, we become stronger, haven't we? We're really becoming Kamen Rider. Remember when we first joined this Nat, which is something I brought up on last week's episode, their journey together. And that this was brought up again between them now instead of me talking about it. And I was like, there's something there. I'm not going to say I'm going to ship them, but I wouldn't be surprised if they end up together by the end of the show, if that's her true love, so to speak. Because, it would make sense, honestly, and I wouldn't be mad. I wouldn't consider that a cop out. Now, the Buffa Geats fight is really good. I like the filming style of it, the choreographed of the moves is very grounded in fighting, less range of Geats just shooting constantly. There was some back and forth. They were so evenly matched, which is how it should be for right now. And the best part was Jean watching on, and Baroba shows up, and she's watching too, and they're just, watching, and she said, he's like, give the driver back, and the Sandberger says, why? This world is ancient history, and that causes Ace to be distracted. Buffa hits him with a tactical strike. He dehensions, and he's like, that's it. I got it. That's the answer. And Ace even puts all the pieces together, and he says, he claims the DGP, the spectators, and everyone else are from the far future. And then Gene agrees, and he even, brings up, yeah, just like I said in the beginning, the Sengoku and the Greek mythology show up in their world as entertainment. That's what this era is to them in the future. The downside is I feel like we're just going to reset everything now because Niram even says, that the current DGP series in this world setting will be ending soon. And even Baroba realized, oh, the cat's out of the bag. Everyone knows it. She's like, well, I guess I got to destroy this place in the Jamato Garden. And she finally henshins. She turns into a giant mecha. And I was like, she just turns into a mech. And there's some similarities there because she kind of had like a bull/buffalo helmet, like how Buffa has. So I'm just like, that's why I'm reading into, are there ties more than just like how deep are the ties in the threads that connect the supporters and who they support? Because that's what's, I'm really curious because that was very similar. So I'm really curious about that. So she turns into a giant mecha, floats up in the air, and slams the ground with fire and explosions. And the cool thing is they cut out all the sound to make it very dramatic as it's spreading and it's hitting our riders and the Dramatos and everything's getting wiped out. And then that's how they freaking end the episode. And I was like, really? Like, you're gonna end it like that? Like, just like that? Like, okay. And then we get our DGP rule, and now it just confirms everything. The DGP is a reality rider show made to entertain an audience from the far future and uses various time periods from across history as settings for the games. So now I'm just like, okay, now that we know it takes place in different time periods, I want to know more about the participants. Because, like, if it is different time periods, how does this explain Keiwa and Sarah's parents being dead? If this is already from a history standpoint. Who is Ace's mom? Does this time period thing explain why he saw things, flashbacks from like a Greek setting and him having the Greek coin? So there's so many more questions now about how the settings work. I feel like we are going to get a reset to the DGP in a new time setting. But obviously we're going to keep the same characters. So I'm wondering how that's going to turn out. That's my main question now. But I'm glad we got some answers. I'm glad we know what the DGP is now because once the tonal shift and everything changed in episode 16, I wasn't sure how I felt about the show. You could see it in the reviews. You could see in what I was saying. Like, I just didn't. I was contemplating and I was questioning if this was going to work out, and I think it does work out. The downside is the disaster stuff was completely throwaway. Really, honestly, when you think about it, was not pertinent to the story. The only thing I see from it is the growth from Keiwa and Neon about it, where Neon had to tap into that shady side to win, and Keiwa finally not being so ignorant to things around him and finally being more perspective and seeing things. But other than that, that's it. That's episode 23. I think it was a really good episode. I think I did see the preview for 24, so I'm really curious where this is gonna go. I think this was a much needed episode because they couldn't continue the DGP the way it was with the disaster stuff and everything else. It wasn't really that good to me personally, but Let me know in the comments below what you thought about Geats episode 23. If you haven't already, I did a video that you can check out where I go over and I rank all the suits and forms up until episode 22, just because there's so many with all the different buckles. I was like, this isn't like Revice or Saber. Like, I need to get this done now before there's too many and the video ends up being ridiculously long. But I thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, I hit 900 subscribers. I thank every single one of you who have checked out the channel and subscribed. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. I'm on the road to 1,000 subscribers now. I got some more videos in the works. But with that being said, I thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.